Good evening, and thank you for your invitation. I'm no stranger here, but it's nice to be back and share a few thoughts that are on our hearts for this group. I want to say that I can report a wonderful time from our last singles big weekend out. We had a great time. We had a lot of laughter and a lot of food and a lot of good coffee and a lot of fun comparing notes, and singles came from all over New Zealand to take the initiative, I guess you could say, to get back the reins of their own life, I guess you could say, and to stop being spectators in their own lives. We can probably have those fans off now, I guess. Leave the air conditioning on. And so I'm just excited again about the prospect of really getting the reins of your own life. I had a guy call in to see me just this afternoon into the clinic, and he said, you challenged me to get the reins of my own life a couple of years ago, and I started to realize that I was living to please everybody else, but I ended up with a life that I didn't actually like. And I also realized there was no good sitting in the bleachers and sulking about it. I actually had to get into the arena and make some changes. And they were pretty radical changes, but he did it. And the result is that now he's got a life that he loves. So my question to you again tonight is, hey, what's it going to take for you to have a life that you love? To live in a place that you love living in, to do a job that you love doing, and to be with people that value you. What's it going to take? And that's the question that I keep putting before my clients. And thank you for welcoming our camera. Richard is a cameraman at large, and he has got a huge website with interviews with every teacher and swami and wise man and guru that Australia and the Middle East and America can offer. And now I'm going to be on it too. So, maybe. And so you just never know, because he phoned me up out of the blue and said, I've heard about you, can I film you please? So here we are. And Dawn, I thank you for this invitation. The topic that we've selected for tonight has to do with assertiveness and with boundaries and with learning how to push back when you need to. And what I find is that assertiveness is such a vital life skill that, in fact, it can really impinge on your mental health if you don't have assertiveness skills. If you don't have basic assertiveness skills, you can end up feeling powerless and feeling cornered and feeling pressured. And if you cannot push back as you need to, let me tell you what's going to happen. The pressure is going to go internal. It's going to go round and round and round inside. And I do love that saying, I have a rather nifty knack of knowing how to answer back. The trouble is, I will admit, it's always midnight when I think of it. Hey guys, there's more chairs here. Come and join us. And so let's start with a simple question. What is a boundary? Lately, Cloud and Townsend have been writing books on boundaries. Boundaries in marriage, boundaries in relationships, boundaries for parents, and boundaries for children. But what is a boundary? You're crossing my boundaries. You're in my space. Well, what is your space? We have a physical space around us, which is important. Every one of you have got a physical space, and it's very close for some people. It's quite far out for others. If you're formal British, it might be quite a large space. But if you're up close and personal Italian, then there's hardly any space at all. And people can handle you and they can touch you, and there's no offense unless you're British and you don't do touch. I remember being in a church one day and the guy in charge said, give somebody close to you a hug. I turned around to give a large woman a hug, and she had her hands glued to her side. She said, sorry, don't do hugs. I'm British. Didn't want her boundaries violated. But we all have these boundaries. That's the physical boundary. I wonder where Dawn's is. I wonder how close her boundary is. I wonder what I would have to do to violate it. When my wife sees this, we're going to have some explaining to do. But she's gone red, so I'm pretty sure I'm inside her space.
I trust you.
That's the only reason I didn't get a whacking, probably. Trust. But that's physical boundaries. Let's talk for a minute now about emotional boundaries. The last person I did that with actually sat on their knee, so you consider yourself lucky. You got off lightly. You know, emotional boundaries mean maybe there's some coercion, maybe there's some bullying, maybe there's some manipulation, maybe somebody's leaning on you. When was the last time somebody actually leaned on you to get what they wanted? When was the last time somebody got in your space and began to apply some pressure? Can be sexual pressure, can be emotional pressure, can be manipulation. Now, the only thing you've got between you and being dominated is a pushback. And the trouble is that many people have never been schooled in pushbacks. They were not taught assertiveness. And when they do push back, they can feel rude or become far too stroppy. So a pushback needs to be firm, but it needs to be gentle. And the trouble is, it's a difficult skill to get. And I'm going to teach you some pushbacks tonight so that you can demonstrate assertiveness. But why is assertiveness such a vital skill? It's got to be so that you can guard your personal space. Now, I would burn out as a counselor if I didn't have so much respect for other people's personal space. I would not last if I kept trying to make people what I want them to be. And so as a counselor, my desire is to invite you and to take you to the edge, but not to push you over. Not to dominate you or not to bully you, but to keep offering you the options that are in front of you and to do it assertively. If I'm too assertive, then people start to feel crowded and dominated. And years ago when I was studying pastoral care at university, my professor said to me, David, he said, when you're a pastor, your problems will not come from assertive people. If they think you're a wally, they'll tell you to your face and you'll get it sorted out. It'll be okay. Your problem will come from people who think you're a wally but can't tell you because they don't have the assertiveness skills. Do you follow? People who can't actually say, I'm sorry, that won't work for me. But that's a very good, brief pushback. I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me. The time doesn't work for me. The place doesn't work for me. The offer doesn't work for me. I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me. And yet for the lack of that one little phrase, people will avoid going on a date, or they will avoid a proposition, or they will just shun you completely because when push comes to shove, they can't say, I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me. Do you follow? So it may seem simple, but would you say it with me, please? I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me. Again? I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me. Because people are always pushing a little bit for this or for that. They have to survive. And I'm sorry, but it doesn't work for me to stop and be converted to Mormonism right now. I'm just in the middle of vacuuming the house. I'm sorry, but it doesn't suit me to be at church this Sunday. I've got something on. That doesn't work for me. I'm sorry, I'd like to help you out, but not this weekend. It'll have to be the next. That won't work for me. To babysit won't work for me tonight. I know I'm single and I know I'm easily taken advantage of, but it doesn't suit me to babysit your kids tonight. They're little brats, you don't train them properly anyway. See, I just moved from assertiveness to stroppiness. Did you get the difference?
Yeah.
So,
Pushback when you tell your husband like a Christmas morning, 8:30.
if you start hassling me, the law is there to protect me, is a pushback. No question about it. So, we've got boundaries to protect our space. The skill of assertiveness is to assert our space. And did you know that in every argument there's one thing in common? Every time Mum and Dad had an argument, every time you argued with your brother or sister, every time you argue with your boss or your flatmate, here's the thing that's in common. One person is trying to assert their reality over the other person's perspective. That's always a thing in common, whether it be arguing over parenting styles or arguing over diet or arguing over spending money. One person is saying, my reality is superior to yours. What I think suits you is superior to what you think suits you. What I think is a reasonable amount of money is superior to what you think is a reasonable amount of money. And here's the thing. Most of this stuff is relative truth. Not much of it is absolute truth. Most arguments are over relative truth. Taste, fashion, culture, things that really no one has the right to say, this is right. Now, there is absolute truth, but most arguments are about things that are actually just relative. And if you don't know the difference, here's a little phrase to help you. In matters of principle, stand firm. In matters of taste, give way. If you just remember that little phrase, in matters of principle, stand firm, but in matters of taste, give way, you won't become a bully. You'll never become a bully because you'll know that you don't have the right to insist that your taste is superior to somebody else's. And children often lose respect for their parents when their parents get really stroppy about things that are really a matter of taste, not a matter of principle. Well, coming back then to the point, in a discussion, in an argument, in a conflict, one person is saying, my perspective is more reliable than yours. And that's what it is to be chauvinistic or dominating or bullying or a dictator or a tyrant. And many times in a marriage, man and woman fight in order that their perspective would gain the upper hand. Now here's the thing. The way to be with strong people is just as strong. Now, when I'm with a 10-year-old girl who's shy and been abused, I have to be as weak as she is. Because if I'm not, I'll dominate the session, I'll never hear her heart, and she'll never receive what I'm saying. But if I've got a gruff, rough, bullying, overbearing 50, 60-year-old CEO who always gets his way, I've got to be just as tough. And I've got to nail his backside to the wall if necessary. He won't be grateful, but his wife will be, because she's been looking for someone to do that for her for a long time. Now here's the thing, I cannot do that unless I'm up with my assertiveness skills. Because some people need to be corrected. Many times a woman in church is having a struggle with her husband and she can't reach him, she can't appeal to him, she can't corner him, so she goes to the pastor and she says, can you help me show this guy that what he's doing is abusive? Suddenly pastor's nowhere to be found because he doesn't have the assertiveness skills that he needs either, or he just wants to avoid a conflict or a fight. You know something? Conflict isn't bad. And if you've been taught to believe that all conflict is a negative, a no-no, or somehow unchristian, that's going to emasculate you, that's going to pacify you, that's going to knock your courage out. I said to one lady who was practicing assertiveness on me, because she had to role play it in the counseling center, I said, now while you're being assertive and telling me what to do and where to go and how to be, I said, what's the feeling that's flooding over you? She said, I feel rebellious. You see, her parents or her religion or something had trained her that assertiveness is not for women. When women are assertive, they're rebellious. And so she said, I feel like I'm being stroppy and rebellious. In other words, assertiveness had been defiled as stroppiness in her makeup. And that's what you've got to do. You've got to understand, to say something, I'm sorry, that won't work for me, is not you being defiant or rebellious or somehow a bad Christian. It's just simply getting a balance of power. And I believe that God has given us the right to assert ourselves so that we can have a balance of power with everybody. As you know, Christ is my role model. And I love the words that he said to Herod when Herod said, "How dare you be silent before me? Don't you know I can order your death at any moment?" I'm paraphrasing. Do you know what Christ said to him in return? He was very assertive and very gentle. He said, "The only power you've got is what my Father in heaven has given you." Wow. And then he lapsed back into silence. He'd said everything he needed to say. That's assertiveness, saying what you need to say and nothing more. You don't need to give them their pedigree. You don't need to remind them what their father does or their mother used to do. You don't need to remind them what they did a year ago. You say what you need to say and you stop there. And very few people can do that. They've got to find arsenal and weaponry to back their case up. And that's where they make their mistake. They either clam up or they blow up. But they can't just say what basically needs to be said and then stop. Now, I've got some notes for you, and if my beautiful assistant could hand them out. These, actually, I'll keep one. Thank you. And I'll take you through this. This comes straight out of the Living Wisdom Manual, and I'll just take you through it, because I think there's something in here that might be helpful. Are you all warm enough, or cold enough, or comfortable enough? Yeah? Next time I see you, I'll give you the website that you can see this on if you want to. Do you remember that little ditty, "I have a nifty knack of knowing how to answer back. The trouble is I'm in the shower when I think of it," or something. The trick is to know what it is you need when you need it, not later. So I'll just take you through this. Without this skill of assertiveness, you can't maintain a balance of power, which is so essential to gain mental health and health in day-to-day relationships. Do you know something? I have noticed there is a direct relationship between mental health and the ability to gain a balance of power with everybody. You show me a child or a teenager that cannot get a balance of power with his classmates, teammates, and friends, and I'll show you a kid who's starting to drop into rejection, starting to drop into disappointment, starting to drop into depression, because he cannot or she cannot find her balance of power with her peers. And that has implications for mental health for the rest of your life. The issue of finding the courage to assert oneself in a way that is gentle and non-inflammatory. Would you underline the word non-inflammatory, please? Because I'm really over students who get a hold of this and then go out there and start being stroppy. Is largely about the need for skill, both to protect one's boundaries and to be honest with others about what you are really thinking and really feeling. In this way, one can graciously retain self-respect in the face of intimidation, coercion, and domination, without resorting to resentment or belligerence or just living reactively. Now, the reality of life is that we are constantly bumping into other people's wishes, will, values, and agenda. Constantly. Does anybody not know that? But this is not such a problem if we understand that conflict is inevitable in this life and that it is in itself neutral. You get it? Conflict is neutral. Rather, it's how we handle it that determines whether or not, for us, it will be a positive or a negative experience. I consider that some people, because of their self-centeredness, their insecurity, or their need to control, are by nature intrusive. Say intrusive. That's a good word, intrusive. Excuse me, you're bordering on intrusive. That is, they will not hesitate to intrude upon our personal space or sovereignty to serve their own purposes, rather like a person who walks right into your house without knocking on the door or asking for permission to come in close. They just show up in your face. In other words, they don't respect boundaries. A gate is a boundary. A fence is a boundary. A front door is a boundary. A door to your bedroom or your bathroom is a boundary. And some people just don't respect them. You know, when you're first up best dressed, you lose sight of boundaries. When you're in the bathroom and the rest of your family insist on just coming in and out as they please, whether you're in the shower or on the toilet, it doesn't matter, you lose track of boundaries. And some families don't have any boundaries. I know one father, he insisted on the right to walk into the bathroom wherever he pleased, whether his daughter was in the shower or not. And mum and dad often walked around nude and didn't care. Just no boundaries. But don't be too quick to condemn them, for it is likely that they cross your boundaries simply because they don't even know your boundaries are there. That's it. They crash your boundaries because, well, maybe your own emotional echoes of domination or being bullied from childhood which cripple you, or through lack of word power, you haven't been able to tell them, or push back when they themselves dominate you. What am I trying to say there? I'm trying to say that if you won't say where your boundaries are, then you don't have the right to get resentful to people who keep crashing them. You've got to be able to say, that's my line. Don't get snotty if they just keep walking over it. Okay, so learning how. Now, unless you want to be a victim, and some people do actually like being victims, believe it or not, there's little use complaining about the pushy person in your life, because ultimately the only real way to survive them is to learn how to gently and firmly push right back. Certainly you must remember that the one thing you must never do with a bully is indulge them. It only makes them worse. For example, wrongly understood, the religious concept of female submission degenerates into female subjugation, which does real damage to both the male and female involved. How does it do that? It makes a victim of the female and a bully of the male. And just today I had clients who have that background in their lives. Learning how to be honest and to be able to do it gently and with quiet dignity is the goal here. Speaking the truth in love, you might call it. And the ability to do this easily is picked up by watching one's parents model assertiveness. If your mum or dad didn't have assertiveness skills, where did you get yours from? Because these things are actually copied, imitated. If they were unable to gently assert themselves, and I do mean gently, it is probable that you have learnt other less helpful ways of keeping a sense of space and control. I talked to a guy today, his boss has got a short temper, a violent temper, and so he's learned to second guess his boss. He anticipates how his boss is going to receive bad news, and then he either doesn't tell him or he tells him a modified version of it. That's called second guessing. It's called walking on eggshells, and I'll tell you what, it's hard to enjoy working with a boss when you've got to walk on eggshells all day. That's second guessing, chronic second guessing. Perhaps by avoiding anyone you know to be pushy, or by withdrawing and becoming passive, or clamming up repeatedly until you finally blow up in exasperation and rage and thereby summon that burst of anger needed to overpower the aggressive one. I have discovered that I don't need anger when I have assertiveness skills. I don't have to blow up in order to get my space back. And I find that pretty cool, actually. It means that I don't need to lose my dignity every time I've got a dominating person in my life. Otherwise, you're going to have a blow-up to clear the air or to get your boundaries back. Such antics are unnecessary if you will take the time to compose some comments which can bounce the one who intrudes, takes you for granted, or in some way abuses your boundaries. You know, I was talking to a doctor the other day, and this doctor told me that every day somebody comes in there putting pressure on him to get them on a sickness benefit. Every day somebody comes in there putting pressure on him to warrant them as unserviceable for the purpose of getting a benefit. And he said, I have got very touchy when people start trying to put some pressure on me for that. Here's a few examples of how you might do this with dignity. When offended, you might ask directly, were you trying to offend me with that comment? Because I don't know how else to interpret it. If you're feeling offended, if you're feeling like you've been belittled, then my advice to you is to come straight up and say, are you trying to belittle me? Are you trying to put me on the back foot? Did you deliberately misconstrue what I just said? Because that's how the mind game players work. And the best way that you can do to deal with it is to confront them with it. The last time somebody took my words, twisted them, and fired them back at me, regretted it.
Isn't that letting them know that they've got to you?
Yeah, I guess it is. It's letting them know that they're over my line and it's time for them to pull back a little bit. You know, when being taken for granted, you could try, well, just remember, these are your priorities, not mine, and they won't be mine until we've negotiated. Because, you know, lots of people try to make their priorities into your priorities. What does that sign on the office say? An emergency on your part doesn't constitute a priority on mine. Get your act together or something. I forget how it goes. Do you know the one I'm referring to? Anyway, welcome. I trust you'll catch up. We're bottom paragraph, called Boundary or Wall. There are many more such one-liners which serve effectively to help you draw a boundary around others' words and actions, and sometimes you may need to practice them ahead of time, that you may have peace in your heart when confronting the rude or belligerent person in your life. By the way, we've all got somebody like that. Is there anybody here who doesn't have a rude or belligerent person in your life? You're missing out. You know that, don't you? You really need a rude or belligerent person in your life. Then you can practice these pushbacks. If you don't, come and see me at supper time and I'll see what I can arrange if you don't have anybody like that. Because I got plenty to spare. But such a person can actually become an asset to your life if you arise to the challenge of building a stronger I in order to regain your dignity and self-respect. Make no mistake, your I is protected by assertiveness skills. That's how you protect the I. Remember that if you can't place a boundary around others, you'll either have to rescue them and overfunction or simply build a wall around yourself. They say, what's your poison? And some people's poison is to build a wall around their hearts. Others is to rescue and overfunction. While this may protect your feelings in the short term, it will always end up becoming a prison within which you have trapped yourself and excluded yourself from healthy relationships, because armor always has that effect. You know, the last group that I took, the singles big weekend out, I was on the lookout the whole weekend for walls. And whenever I saw a person do a wall or do armor, I quickly, quietly took them aside and said, you know what? You don't need that wall this weekend. You know what? You never needed that wall, actually. You know what? If you keep putting walls up, how are you ever going to become vulnerable? And if you never become vulnerable, how are you going to bond to anybody? You cannot bond to another human being as long as you've got armor on. You've heard me say that before, right? And it's the truth. But how can you take your armor off unless you can keep safe while naked? I don't mean physically naked. You know that. You can figure that out, can't you? If you're going to be emotionally transparent, if you're going to be exposed, you better have a way of keeping safe. And so assertiveness is the solution to walls, it's the solution to armor, and it's the solution to anger. People get very angry if they have no assertiveness skills. They can't just say what they need to say. So, no more second guessing. Remember, there is within each one of us the ability to predict what the other will most likely say or do in response to our newfound honesty. However, you must get quite clear in your own mind that however they choose to respond, that is not your responsibility. Why do we feel so responsible when other people take offense? Well, maybe because we contributed to it, or maybe they just don't like the truth. There's always going to be people who take offense whenever confronted with the truth. What are you going to do with those people? In everybody's life here, there's at least one person, and probably several in your life, who will punish you if you are honest with them. What are you going to do with those people? Maybe you're one of them. You tell me the truth and you're off my Christmas card list forever. It's hard to trust those people. If you're in the habit of second-guessing another reaction and so heavily edit what you would actually like to say, it is actually you who are crossing their boundaries now by playing too big a role in their responses. You're trying to take care of both sides of the conversation, and you got to get out of their court. Did you see the film The Horse Whisperer? I get it, lady. In a conversation, you like to take care of both sides. I remember that line. It was a classic. So get out of their court. Confine yourself to simply being honest about your feelings and let them react however they will. How should you let them react?
However they will.
Again?
However they will.
However they will. Until you get that clear, you're going to be over-functioning, or you're going to be putting big walls up. In other words, don't try to protect them from their own thinking or fragile ego. That really is their problem. Your childhood survival kit must be given up. Chronic second guesses are chronically dishonest. Shortly, we're going to have a wee discussion about that, but we'll come back to it in a moment. Remember that phrase, though. Chronic second guesses are chronically dishonest. Finally, remember that peace of mind comes with the assurance of adequate resources. That was an old 18th century definition of peace of mind that I picked up from a very old book a long time ago, that peace comes with the reassurance of adequate resources. Whether it be money under the mattress to pay the debt collector, whether it be pushback skills to cope with a bully, peace comes with the reassurance that you've got what it takes when push comes to shove. And if you don't believe you have the resources you need, whether it's to give a speech or give a talk, whether it's to pay the bills or cope with the big person in your life, you will not have peace. You'll only have that peace that is needed to confront with quiet dignity when you know you will have the replies you need when you need them. The one who tries to think on his feet usually loses. Did you know that? As for the echoes that arise to silence you, they will soon die down after a few successful pushbacks gives you a powerful redefining moment. Now, a woman said to me once, she said, I am the CEO of my organization. I have 40 people on my staff, and none of them would dare to disobey me. When I go home for Christmas, suddenly I'm the kid sister, and I'm told what to do and what to do in the kitchen and where to put the chairs, and I'm told to do the vacuuming. And they said, you know, the crazy part is, I can't tell them where to go. I can't tell them to get lost. I just drop back into that state of, you know, I'm the little sister here. She said, what happens to me? I lose my brain. And I said, that's because you've got a domestic brain and you've got a professional brain, and at work you're in your professional brain. But when you're back in your family, you're back in your domestic brain. And that's why all the great skills you've learnt as a professional, you lose track of the moment you go back to your family home. It's interesting, isn't it? You're actually functioning in a different space. And in that space, you don't have those assertiveness skills. You don't have that status and dignity in that space. She said, what am I going to do? And I said, take those resources back with you when you go. Connect up your domestic brain to your professional brain. How is it you can negotiate with clients all day and then be a bear with a sore head at night that can't negotiate to save yourself? Well, that's the answer. You're using a different part of your brain. You're in a different space. Then you'll no longer be a doormat. You have achieved a balance of power upon which mutual respect relies with the control freak in your life. Welcome to adulthood. Did you know I can't call you an adult until you have risked standing up to the most important person in your life and you've held your ground? Until then, really, you're still a child. You earn your adult spurs when you can stand up to the big person in your life And you can let them react however they like, but you hold your ground, and you do it not with ranting and raving and crying and sulking and screaming and shouting, but with dignity. That's really when you individuate. And if your father or mother did not allow you to individuate as an adolescent, hey, guess what? Better late than never. It's never too late to individuate. Was that corny or was that profound? You can work that out. Now, let me finish with this. And then we'll take some questions. What I find very helpful is to know what assertiveness is not. When you're learning a new skill, when you're learning a new skill, it's important not to cross the boundary and go over into stroppiness. So let's have a look at what assertiveness is not. It's not barreling people out of the blue and demanding an immediate explanation. You're not hijacking them or ambushing them. If you ambush people out of the blue and demand immediate explanation, that's not assertiveness. That's just bullying. That's just you trading places with the bully. You got it? 2, it's not ignoring their need for time and space to process the stuff that you've come up with. You've been dwelling on it for days or weeks. Give them some time to dwell on it. 3, it's not making them out to be at fault because you don't want to humble yourself and take correction. Now, make no mistake, I've pulled people out of psychosis with this teaching. I've pulled people out of depression and despair with this teaching. I've pulled people out of bipolar with this teaching. Why? Because those mental illnesses were the result of not finding a place to stand in the community of people, not being able to find their own space. 4thly, communicating by laying down verdicts and refusing to hear any protests. Verdict communication is not assertiveness. I had a verdict father and a verdict mother. One of the most common phrases I remember as a child was, "because I said so." Now there's a time to say, "because I said so," but every day, every hour, that's just verdict parenting. It's lazy parenting, actually. And where are you going to go when somebody just says, "because I said so"? There's no reason in that. There's no reasoning with that. But St. James, in the book of James in the Bible, says that the wisdom that emanates from God, this is how you can identify the wisdom that comes from God. It's peaceful, it's gentle, and it's easily entreated. Now, easily entreated means you can reason with it. You remember the Old Testament scripture when God says to the Hebrews, "Come now, let us reason together." That's not bullying. Assertive, yeah, but bullying, no. And so when I work with cults and cult leaders, I got to tell the cult leaders, you're misrepresenting the heart of God by your verdicts, by your what do they call hand down edicts. You're doing edicts. Edicts is control. Edicts is not a balance of power. And the one thing a cult leader's got no use for is a balance of power. And so sometimes I've had to say to fathers and mothers, you know, as a Christian parent, you're actually misrepresenting the heart of Jesus when you just parent from behind verdicts. Now, there is a time for an edict, that's true, but not as your general personal style. So how was your dad? How was your mum? Did they sit down and reason it through with you and show you the reasons and work it through? Or is it this way or no way, this way or the highway? What was it? I remember my dad telling me, I was only about 7 years old, he said, "Boy, it's my way or the highway around here." And so I learned that you can't reason with authority. And over-talking or interrupting. All of these activities mean that the aggressor is under too much internal pressure to dialogue. Heal the real issue. And a couple of little notes here before we open it for questions. And I'll grab this mic so that anybody who wants to can ask a question, because we would like to record this. And if this causes you to suddenly go silent, then we'll just have to turn camera off and carry on the discussion. But a couple of points here that you may find of some interest. A person who dominates a conversation only learns what he already knows. Isn't that cool? If I dominate a counselling or clinical session, I am not going to learn anything new. Do you know, in the last half an hour, I haven't learned a thing. Not a thing. You get it? I like that. You know, darling, if you keep talking in this conversation, you're not going to learn anything new, are you? Assertive people, I like this. Assertive people don't need to get angry. They have already said what they needed to avoid feeling powerless. Assertive people don't need to get angry. They've already said what they needed to say. They don't build up a head of steam because they've already set their boundaries. And they've already said that's far enough. You know, if you can't set a boundary, you're going to have to build a wall. And finally, to be assertive, first be sure of your ground. There's nothing worse than not actually knowing what you're talking about and trying to be assertive. So the clearer you are about what you expect, the more assertive you can be. But if you don't know what you can expect, and if you don't know where your space is, and if you don't know what you're trying to achieve, you won't know how to put it. And you'll send yes, yes, no, no messages simultaneously. You like this? So sometimes I've got to think a thing through before I go in and confront the big person. But I also want to know that if they say this or that, then I've got a response to that. Because if you try and think on your feet, you're going to lose. Not that I want to win. What I want is mutual respect. I want to be able to look you in the eye and say, yes, I know you need that. And you know what? You can have that providing I receive this. It's just like before you go haggling at the garage sale, know what your top price is. Know what you'll pay. You know what you want to get it for. You want to have it all your own way. But you also want to know what your top price is. And in the same assertiveness, know what you can put up with and what you can't. Who would like to be nice and brave and ask a question that's on your mind and ask it on this?
I have a question.
Pass it over.
My question is about when you are exercising your assertiveness with your children, and there are other children and other parents present, and their boundaries don't match with yours. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to maintain your boundaries with your own children, but the other kids don't have the same boundaries, and I wonder what your response is going to be to that.
You know what? I'm wondering what my response is going to be to that as well. Yes, darling, well, they're just bad parents, that's all.
That's, I have been saying, well, that I'm not their parents, I'm your parents, but it's kind of, is that enough for them?
My first response was facetious. I want that to go on record. I think you do pretty well. I just think you to say, well, yes, darling, well, that's their business, it's not ours. In our family, we do it like this. And everyone will notice your halo. And Anna Mary Grant teach that as well. They just say, well, in our family, this is how we do it. And that denotes pride. That introduces pride. That we don't have to be like everybody else, and that in our family, this is how we do it. And you'll retain their respect as well. And you'll be a role model for the people that are not bothering.
Thank you.
Any more? Go for it. Pass it along, thanks.
what's the best way to deal with someone that you think overreacts?
That's a fair question. What do you do with people who overreact? I think the first thing is to observe that and be honest and be straight up and just say, your reaction seems to be out of all proportion to what's happening. What's going on for you right now? David Riddell teaches that an overreaction is symptomatic of an unbearable feeling. Have I just been prodding on a hurty bit? Has somebody been poking on a hurty bit? Because that's the truth, actually. But if my wife overreacts to something, my first question is, hey, where did I press? Did I press on something? And sometimes I'll say to a person, what's going on for you right now? Or what does this remind you of? Because 9 times out of 10, you've actually invoked a ghost or an echo for them. And if you can just help them grab that echo by asking, what does the situation remind you of? They're either going to say, wow, you know what? Or they're going to say, stop using your psychology tricks on me and just answer the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Remember, assertiveness is not an excuse to avoid taking correction. If the cap fits, you wear it. Only if it doesn't, do you hand it back. Are you big enough to wear it when the cap fits is a good question.
What happens then in that case if you are the bully and you're confronting a partner or somebody and that person reacts in a very reactive way because they have been used to dealing with you as a bully? How do you change that and reassuring the person or, you know?
Yeah, how do you reassure a person who's expecting a bully and expecting a monster? And what I do is I've said to people, you know what, you need to thaw me out because I think you've frozen me into my past. I don't...
To blame on them though, isn't it?
Oh no, it's just asking them to reassess you. Could you reassess me please? Could you thaw me out? I think you've frozen me into the past. Could you reassess me? Or, hey, I'm sorry if I've come on too strong in the past. I'm really trying to earn your trust now. And you're asking to be reassessed. But remember, they may still be waiting for an apology for old offences. Do you know something? It's very difficult to reassess somebody until they've actually expressed their regret for what they said or did. And quite often in marriage counselling, you'll find a person overreacting to their spouse, and what they're actually doing is they've held them frozen into the past, and the reason for that, even though the person is no longer demonstrating that bad habit, is because that person has never actually humbled themselves. And you know, I deeply regret the way I used to be towards you. I deeply regret the way I used to respond. And I know myself that I was still assessing my wife by things she had done years earlier, and she had to draw that to my attention. She had to say, honey, I've changed. I'm not like that now. And I'd say, I'll be the judge of that. But nevertheless, she'd get through to me that actually I'd frozen her into her past and I really needed to reassess her.
What about if you have apologised several times for something?
Give her the mic. This question's a good one.
Okay, if you've apologised to this person numerous times in writing and you can prove it, and they say you never apologised for it, what do you do with somebody like that? Apart from throwing the letters at them. Which I got that.
Well, the truth is that everybody suffers from what I call a default mood. And that person's default mood is just, hey, you never apologize. At least that's how it feels to me. And if I feel like you never apologize, well, how could my feelings ever lie to me? And so they're in an automatic emotion of feeling unapologized to, and their feelings are ruling their mind. And so the only response is, I know that's how it feels to you, but I wonder if your feelings could be telling you lies.
I use that.
Yeah.
Psychobabble.
Ah. And psychobabble is what you can fling at people if you don't want to take correction.
That's what I thought.
Well, we're great minds.
Myself. That's good.
Yeah, I think so. There are some people who would rather abuse you and call you all kinds of weird and wonderful names than just accept that they could be wrong. And you got to live with that. But you can still be assertive. You can still say, you know what, sometimes it's easier just to take offense than to take correction, isn't it? That's assertive. That's assertive. Now, after the break, we have a very short break, but after the break, I want to give you a list of pushbacks, and I want you to choose a favorite, or two favorites, and tell us which two you've chosen. Some of them are funny, some of them are very powerful, some of them are a little cliched, but I'm going to give you a list of pushbacks, and I want each of you to choose your two favorites and read them to the group, okay? And we'll have a good laugh. Now I want to read you some examples of some very bad pushbacks. They're very funny, but they always inflame. This is called How to Start a Fight. One year I decided to buy my mother-in-law a cemetery plot as a Christmas gift. The next year I didn't buy her a gift at all. And when she asked me why, I replied, well, my dear, you still haven't used the gift I bought you last year. And that's how the fight started. My wife and I were watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire while we were laying in bed. I turned to her and said, honey, do you want to have sex? No, she answered. Then I said, is that your final answer? She didn't even look at me this time, just saying yes. So I said, well, then I'd like to phone a friend. And that's when the fight started. I took my wife to a restaurant the other day. The waiter, for some reason, took my order first. I'll have the rump steak, rear, please, he said. Aren't you worried about the mad cow? Nah, she can order for herself, I said. And then the fight started. My wife and I were sitting at a table at her high school reunion, and she kept staring at a drunken man swigging his drink as he sat alone at a nearby table. I asked her, do you know that man? Yes, she sighed. He's my old boyfriend. I understand he took to drinking right after we split up those many years ago, and I hear he hasn't been sober since. My goodness, I said, who would think a person could go on celebrating that long? And then the fight started. When our lawnmower broke and wouldn't run, my wife kept hinting to me it was time to get it fixed. Somehow, I always had something else more important to do. Thinking of being clever, she found a way to make her point. When I arrived home from work one day, I found her seated in the tall grass, snipping away with a tiny pair of sewing scissors, every blade. I looked at her for a moment, then went into the house. When I came out, I handed her a toothbrush. I said, well, when you finish cutting the grass, you might as well sweep the driveway as well. The doctors say I will walk again, but I'll always have a limp. My wife sat down next to me as I was flipping channels on telly. She asked, what's on TV? I said, dust. And then the fight started. Saturday morning, I got up early, quietly dressed, made my lunch and slipped quietly into the garage. I hooked the boat up to the van and proceeded to back out into a torrential downpour. It was blowing a gale, so I pulled back into the garage, turned on the radio and discovered the weather was going to be bad all day. So I went back into the house, undressed and slipped back into bed quietly, cuddled up to my wife's back, now with a different anticipation, and whispered, the weather out there is terrible. My loving wife of 10 years replied, and can you believe my stupid husband is out fishing in it? And that's how the fight started. My wife was hinting about what she wanted for our upcoming anniversary. She said, I want something shiny that goes from 0 to 150 in about 3 seconds. So I bought her a set of bathroom scales. And then the fight started. My wife was standing nude, looking in the bedroom mirror. She was not happy with what she saw, and she said to me, I feel horrible. I look old, fat, and ugly. I really need you to pay me a compliment. I replied, well, your eyesight's darn near perfect. And then the fight started. I rear-ended a car this morning, the start of a really bad day. The driver got out of the car and guess what? He was a dwarf. He looked up at me and he said, I am not happy. So I said, okay, no need to get huffy. Which one are you then? And that's how the fight started. Now see, those are all examples of pushbacks, but none of them are good ones. So if you go away from here and start doing pushbacks like that, please don't tell anybody who taught it to you. All right? I got worse than that. You just got the mild ones. Okay, so tell me, what was your favourites in that list? Anybody at all? We don't want the mic for this, do we, Richard?
Well, I guess we'll speak up.
Yeah?
Let's just put the mic on the table.
Okay.
Maybe it'll pick up.
Anybody at all, what are your favourites?
Can I get back to you on that one, please? I also need to think about it for a bit.
Yeah, don't let them barrel you. That's good. Don't let them barrel you. Don't let them ambush you.
Me like the cave, so we're allowed to have a little one.
Okay. And what's the other one you like? Okay. Any more?
Explain to me again, how does this matter concern you?
That's a good one. Explain to me again. How does this matter concern you? Yep. That's good. That's good. You got another one?
Grounded. I actually also rather, because I tend to use this a lot, because I do need to think about things.
Yeah.
The one that Yvonne mentioned,
Yeah.
Can I get back to you?
Yeah.
Please, I need to think about it.
That's good.
You change.
Yeah.
You think one thing and then
Yeah.
you're thinking you can actually change.
Give it. That's it. Don't be rushed. Get back to you.
Quite well with children as well.
Yeah, I'll get back to you on that. Okay. Good.
A little bit like that is we'll need to negotiate on that one a little further, I think.
Yeah, we're going to negotiate a bit on that one. Yeah, we haven't quite finished this volley. Let's just keep this negotiation going a bit longer. You need ownership of what you do, and sometimes it takes time to think it through to get that ownership. Otherwise, you're going to go straight into obligation.
I've used this one here. Let me say this just once more.
Yeah.
And the person just stopped in mid-sentence, basically, and took a step back.
Yeah.
Physically took a step back.
Yeah.
And it was really good.
That's like the old, what part of no are you having trouble understanding?
Was it a deliberate misconstrue of what I just said?
Oh, that's a good one.
Now, why would you want to do that?
Yeah, why would you want to misconstrue me? Yeah, they do. They do, it is. Why would you just deliberately misconstrue what I just said? Why would you do that? Why did you turn my no into yes? When I said no, did you hear yes? Any more?
I was sharing some of what David's taught me in the past recently, and they used that one on me.
Which one?
Did they just?
Yeah.
Was
that a deliberate misconstrual? I was floored.
There you go. There you go. What's it like to be on the end of it?
Yeah.
You see, it's in the tone as well. It's in the spirit and the attitude and the tone. Two people can say the same pushback. One causes a fight. The other one just sets the line in the tone and the manner in which you say it.
Because some of them are quite inflammatory.
They could be if you said it with the wrong tone.
Yeah.
But David, even when you say things in a tone like this, some people...
Oh, yeah. It's true. It's true. They take it personally.
Don't shout at me. I'm thinking...
I didn't shout.
Okay, if you want me to shout, I can show you that. Yeah. Different tone.
Yeah. Don't shout at me. Don't tempt me to shout at you. Yeah. But I think if you actually read the words, you'll find the words themselves are not actually inflammatory. The response could be,
Kind of sarcastic.
again, are you projecting onto it your own stuff? And that's the challenge.
That's right. I suppose if it's said in a genuine inquiry,
Exactly.
it's completely different.
Exactly.
I haven't said this one out loud, the one at the bottom of the page. Is that comment really about me, or is it actually saying more about you? But I thought, and that's really been good for me to be able to sort of stop myself saying the next sentence,
Yes.
which could be
Yes.
sarcastic or
Yes. Yes. But can you say it out
I
loud?
haven't said it out loud.
Can you say, is your comment about me, or does it say more about you? And kids need to hear that one. Children desperately need that pushback. Desperately. Every time the bully or the idiot in the class puts them down, they need to be able to say, is that about me, or does it say more about you?
What do you do with legitimate situations, like when I had a situation this afternoon really with somebody, and I had to be competitive. Like I was going to accept the ride if it was available.
Wouldn't be able to comment on that unless I'd been there, I don't think.
Yeah. Can I run it past you later and see if I responded correctly?
Sure, give it a go. Any more?
I quite like, if we're going right down the page, if we're allowed to go past that lot there, yes, perhaps you do feel controlled or patronised, and perhaps your feelings could be telling you lies. And it's just letting somebody know that their feelings might be actually coming from the wrong place.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that perhaps
Exactly.
talk about where their motivations are coming from, because sometimes feelings, people are controlled more by feelings than by...
And we call that emotion-based reasoning,
Yeah.
emotion-directed reasoning. And when people are run by their feelings, maybe you need to fire a shot across their bow and say, I know that's how you feel, but maybe your feelings are telling you lies. And there's a time to do that. There's a time to say that. Do it gently, but do it firmly. I feel patronised by you. Yes, and your feelings could be lying to you, couldn't they? Wow. Never thought of that. I feel belittled. I feel disrespected. I feel shut out. I feel excluded. Yes, and your feelings could be lying to you, couldn't they? That's a pushback. A very powerful one for emotion-based reasoners. It's never occurred to them that their feelings could lie to them. Never occurred to them.
Because people can use those comments as a pushback themselves.
Indeed. Indeed. Yeah.
I was thinking,
Share it with us.
I prefer not to be wound up.
I like that one. I prefer not to be wound up at the moment, thanks. Could you go and start on your father? Maybe you'd like to take it out on your mum.
This one here, I think we got confused about this Paul Williams and it's confidential.
Yeah.
I don't. It's a good communication, isn't it? Equal.
Well, you know, you ring a tradesman. Where are you? You were coming to see me. Oh, no, I was waiting for you to get back to me with the price. I gave you the price. I've been waiting for you to get back to me. Oh, okay, so somebody's dropped the ball. So let's start again. Often happens. I was waiting for you and you were waiting for me. Can you come with me to the last paragraph there? And now for the real issue. Were you second-guessing the other's probable reactions as we read this list? That automatic anticipation is probably the cause of all of your assertiveness problems. The whole bang lot. Again, their response is their responsibility. Last paragraph. If you are sick of playing out the role of the resentful victim, this may be your only alternative. And note this, if you are interpreting these responses as stroppy or as aggressive or as smart aleck, you've completely missed the point of the study. Let me say it one more time. If Christ is our vindicator, and as Christians I hope He is our vindicator, this kind of honesty is as much for the benefit of your difficult person as it is for you. In other words, assertiveness is an act of love. It's an act of nurture to the other person. And until you grasp that, you're always going to be stroppy. You got it? If Christ is our vindicator, this kind of honesty is as much for their benefit as it is for yours, and you must hang on to your reality and thereby keep yourself psychologically safe. It always amazes me that people who believe that they're creating reality as they go along and that reality is whatever you create it can get quite snotty if you don't buy into their reality. What's that about? The gaining of mutual respect is the only way forward in a healthy and developing relationship. Do not defile assertiveness just because it was badly modeled to you by somebody else. That is a weld of defilement which must be healed first and foremost. Remember, if you haven't got boundary skills, then you'll almost certainly be into some pretend agreements with your flatmate, with your boss, with your employee, with your brother or sister. If you can't be assertive with your mama, your brother, your sister, your papa, then you're probably going to be in a pretend agreement with them about money, about vehicles, about accommodation, or about visitation rights. Number 2, you don't need to let down your boundaries until your trust has been earned. I keep my boundaries high until my trust has been earned. That's fine. 3, if you won't learn to push back, how are you going to negotiate? See, in negotiation, you've got to counter proposition. If you can't counter proposition, how are you going to negotiate? 4, any relationship is heading for trouble if one or other party cannot get a balance of power. 5, tone of voice communicates more about attitude than choice of words to most women and some men. You know, they tell us that more than half of what you mean comes across in your tone of voice. The words carry the rest of the message, but the tone of voice carries the bulk of the message. Oh, gee, thanks. Was that grateful? How did you know? Thanks means gratitude. Tone of voice overruled the message. You got it? Without honesty, resentment quickly accumulates. And where will that take you? So, in conclusion, unless you yourself are properly centered first of all, then all of these replies will actually constitute retaliation, which usually results in escalation. You know, there's only one thing that can follow retaliation, and that's escalation. Ask the various nations of the world that are involved in civil war and warfare. It always resulted from retaliation. If your pushback only escalates the anger, check your own attitude. It's all in the motive, isn't it? Is that useful?
Yes.
Well, before we quit, are there any other questions or any challenges to what I've been saying that you'd just like to bring up? Richard?
Yeah, I'd like to bring up, okay, like if we're talking about boundaries and we're working on boundary skills, we're probably working on boundary skills with somebody that is violating our boundaries, right? Mm-hmm. And they're used to it, right? Mm-hmm. So the first thing, we're going to come up with one of these things, and then they're going to be used to just say, well, push that over, that's a pushover. And then you're going to have to, so then I was thinking that one of the most important skills would be to go at it again. So with the second time around and the third time around. And just saying things like, we said that I don't want to really get wound up here. Yeah. Or like saying like, I don't want to get into retaliation here. But I would like to stay with this. Yeah. And let's just kind of run it through a couple of times and see if we can be on equal footing here. Yeah. You know, and then like this one here that says, I'm committed to being honest with you. You know, and let's just put this both ways, right? Yeah. And so then you're going to have to go a second time, maybe a third time, maybe a fourth time. And then it's just like David says that so many people can either clam up or blow up, but you've got to tell the truth with peace. Yeah. Right? And so then that's the second and the third time you're not going to be able to freak out, because then it's retaliation, then it's back to where you don't want to be. Yeah. And so...
And so it's a bit like mastering a piece on the keyboard, practice to get it right. You're not going to get this the first or the second time round. And sometimes our expectations for ourselves are unrealistic. You've got the rest of your life to practice this stuff. Is that long enough? But let's say that what we want is love and relationship more than we want to win. Is that the case? You show me a healthy relationship and I'll show you two people who want relationship more than they want to win. Doesn't mean you...
Saying that is beautiful, like saying that on the second or third time around.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't even want to win, but I don't want to lose either, in that sense.
Well, losing is not good for me, but it's not good for you either if I keep losing to you. I'm going to create a bully here if I keep losing to you. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you've got a couple of truth coaches that spring to mind for people who are struggling with assertiveness to get into their pushbacks?
Yeah, I have. First one is my favourite. If a thing is worth doing, it's worth doing badly, or I get better at it. That's a big one. Yeah. The second one is... Oh, you're still working on the first one? If a thing's worth doing, it's worth doing badly while I get better at it. I think that's a superior truth coach to if a thing's worth doing, it's worth doing well. Because we never do anything well the first time. And so we get discouraged when we didn't do it well. And the fact is, the first time you try and assert yourself, you may get minced. You may get trussed up in a ball and bounced around the room. You're going to say, well, that didn't go well. But you have another go, you work it out. The secondly is just feeling bad doesn't mean I did bad. Just feeling guilty doesn't mean I am guilty. Just feeling shaky because there was conflict doesn't mean I did anything wrong. I've come away myself shaken from a conflict and feeling, hey, how should I feel? Should I feel bad? Should I feel ashamed? Should I feel frightened? No, it's just adrenaline. And so my truth coach would be, if it's just adrenaline, don't worry about it. Really? It'll pass. It'll pass. There are still people that scare me, and they can make me shake. They can give me a dose of adrenaline, but I say, it's only adrenaline, it'll pass.
Could you repeat that again, that first bit you said, that just feeling bad or shaking?
Doesn't mean I've done wrong. Yeah. Because emotion-based reasoners will say, feeling bad means I'm guilty, I've done something wrong.
I'm an emotion-based person, I would think that.
Come and do my course, I'll fix that.
Yeah, really.
Take me 10 days, but I will. I've got a couple of some more amusing pushbacks. Did you ever have a person kind of hassling you, coming on to you, and you thought, where's a good pushback when you need one? Or maybe you'd like some more people coming on to you, I don't know. But here's some pushbacks for unwanted propositions. These are funny, but I don't think I recommend them. The first one says, the man says, hey, honey, haven't I seen you someplace before? And you say, yeah, that's why I don't go there anymore. The man says, is this seat empty? The woman says, yep, and this one will be too if you sit down. The man says, so, want to go back to my place? Wink, wink. The woman says, well, I don't know. Can two people fit under a rock?
Oh, that's good.
Try not to rescue, it's okay. The man says, your place or mine? The woman says, both. You go to yours and I'll go to mine. The man says, I'd like to call you up. What's your number? The woman says, oh, that's in the phone book. The man says, I don't know your name. The woman says, duh, that's in the phone book as well. The man says, so what do you do for a living, sweetie? The woman says, I'm a female impersonator. How am I doing? The man says, hey, come on. We're both here at the bar for the same reason after all. The woman says, yeah, let's go pick up some chicks. Well, that's my sense of humour. It's such a personal thing, isn't it? And I'm going to finish with this. This is a lovely little list of actual sentences found in patients' hospital record charts. I guess you could say, should you really trust doctors? Comment. She has no rigours or shaking chills, but her husband states she was very hot in bed last night. Patient has chest pain if she lies on her left side for over a year. On the second day, the knee was much better, and on the third day, it disappeared altogether. The patient is tearful and crying constantly, as she also appears to be depressed. The patient has been depressed since she began seeing me in 1993. Discharge status, alive, but without my permission. Her attitude is difficult. This patient refused an autopsy. The patient has no previous history of suicides. Carelessly, patient has left white blood cells at another hospital. Patient reports having waffles for breakfast and anorexia for lunch. A doctor, between you and me, we ought to be able to get this lady pregnant. This lady reports that she is now numb from her toes down. Where does it go after your toes? While in ER, she was examined, X-rated, and sent home. Patient stated she had been constipated for most of her life until she got a divorce. Examination of the patient's genitalia reveals that he is circus-sized. Patient was seen in consultation by Dr. Blank, who felt we should sit on the abdomen, and I agree. Patient reports having 2 teenage children, but no other abnormalities. Can you really trust doctors? Well, thank you, troops. I hope that's been of some interest and some use tonight. I really like to equip you to be useful, because life is difficult and people are difficult and people can be dangerous. Yep. So with these skills, you can get that balance of power that means you can be safe no matter how dangerous or belligerent the people. What do you say? Remember, if you can't set a boundary, you're going to have to build a ruddy great wall. And who wants to live behind a wall your whole life? So thank you, Dawn, for your invitation to share my thoughts tonight.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you. If anyone wants another drink before they head away, please feel free. Or you're free to go. And David will be here again next week, same time, and he'll be doing King and Queen Lies.
King and Queen
Lies.
Lies.
Yeah, lies you tell yourself. Yeah. Look forward to that.
Yeah.